You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and we have a jam-packed show for you today. The Utah Jazz are the talk of the NBA. They are the talk of the sporting world, and I am here for it. I live in Utah. I'm a big Jazz fan, and they had quite the game last night. They lose again. Unfortunate. They've lost 3 of 4 to the Sixers this time, and this is becoming a real rivalry. The Jazz and the Sixers, number one in their respective conferences, battling it out, and it goes to overtime. Joel Embiid with a kind of a run back, not even a step back, but like a run back three-pointer to force overtime. He had a monster game, but this is becoming a real, true, legitimate rivalry. And before we get into all of the stuff there, just to recap what happened in that game. Again, it goes to overtime. Donovan Mitchell gets ejected towards the very end of overtime. It was kind of a non-factor that he got ejected. The Jazz were down by a decent amount with less than a minute to go. But he gets ejected in overtime. And Donovan Mitchell, so just to recap again, the box score, Joel Embiid with the monster game of 40 points, 19 rebounds, 3 assists. Ben Simmons had 17 points, 6 assists. Shocker. He put up 17 and 6. Wow, haven't we talked about this before? Gotta credit him for consistency, if nothing else. Okay, and then the big game, though, from Tobias Harris, he had 22, but 11 of those came in overtime. And then on the Jazz side, Donovan Mitchell had 33, but he did not shoot super well. He was 12 of 34 from the field, 5 of 12 from 3. Bogdanovich, 18. Jordan Clarkson, 10. He's usually a spark off the bench. He was only 3 of 10 from the field. Only played 23 minutes. Joe Ingles, 16. Rudy Gobert, 12 points, 9 rebounds. Kind of a bad game for Rudy Gobert. We'll get into that a little bit as well. But so the Jazz ended up losing in overtime. The big controversy is all about the officiating, okay? And if you watched this game and if you heard Donovan Mitchell postgame, he was livid. He had calmed down, but was still livid with the officiating. He left the game, stormed off. He's knocking over water coolers, and he goes into the postgame press conference, and he's talking about how the Jazz are getting screwed. They're literally just the game was stolen from them. We won this game, in my opinion. Things like that, saying it's getting freaking, he didn't say freaking, getting freaking ridiculous. And you can't blame the guy. There were several calls down the stretch of that game that were very, very poorly made, all of which were in the fourth quarter and overtime. And all of them went against the Jazz. So there's the one obvious one. Royce O'Neal tips the ball and saves it before it goes out of bounds. Donovan has a wide open dunk. Okay, and this came with looking here. There was 28 seconds left. Okay, Donovan has a wide open dunk. This is in regulation. 28 seconds left in the fourth quarter. The Jazz are up 116 to 113. A Donovan dunk at this moment literally seals the game. It's over. And they call Royce O'Neal for being out of bounds. So they go and look at it, and you can't really tell from the replay exactly what's going on. And they don't really explain much. The NBA later announced that it was because the ball hit the official in the leg, which, as I looked at the replay, we got to be honest, Jazz fans, it did hit the official in the leg. The beef I have is the official made literally zero effort to get out of the way. If you watch that replay, the ball is tipped. He has all sorts of time to react, and he doesn't. He just stands there and kind of slowly, barely moves back. Dude, it's the end of a close game. There's 28 seconds left in the fourth quarter of a 3-point basketball game, and you're just kind of like falling asleep on the sideline? Or is it a small market conspiracy against the Jazz, and he wanted the ball to hit him in the leg? I don't freaking know. But the ball is the rule is he's standing out of bounds. The ball hits him in the leg. The ball is therefore out of bounds. That is a rule. Jazz fans, we cannot complain about that. We cannot say the ball did not hit him in the leg. It did. What you should be complaining about is that he made zero effort to get out of the way. He made no effort to get out of the way of that ball. And so that now it's like, okay, well, Royce clearly would have gotten to it. He actually had to adjust to the ricochet off his leg to tip it back in play for Donovan's would-be dunk. And so the official makes no effort there. And that's a game-sealing play for the Jazz. That wins the game. It's over. But instead, Joel Embiid gets that run-back three-pointer to force overtime. Well, there's another play where Donovan Mitchell gets called for an offensive foul against Ben Simmons when he goes to make a spin move to his left. So he's spinning left into the lane. And Ben Simmons is hooking Donovan Mitchell's left arm. So Donovan's spinning left, ball's in his right hand, and Ben Simmons is literally hooking and holding to his chest Donovan Mitchell's left arm. And they called Donovan Mitchell for an offensive foul. I've been watching basketball my entire life. I have never seen that. You will never see it again. That was the worst offensive foul call I have ever seen in basketball. A guy is being hooked by a defender and is called for an offensive foul. Absolutely ridiculous. And so that's another key play. There's another one where Donovan goes into the lane, gets his shot blocked by Joel Embiid, gets the ball back immediately, though, goes up for a second shot, clearly gets hit on the arm, right above the elbow, on his forearm, very clearly. He misses a 2-foot shot by like 3 feet, which, I'm sorry, he doesn't do that. He's not, and it's because the ball slipped out of his hands when he got hit in the arm. He gets hit in the arm, the ball kind of jars loose from his hand, so he ends up kind of almost like, in his follow-through, almost just like tipping it. It almost becomes a tip-in because now the ball's been jarred loose from getting fouled. No call there. So there were several critical calls and or no calls, all of which went against the Jazz, and it's baloney. Like, it's total baloney. And there is data showing that these small market teams, the Jazz being number one, get the worst end of things on the plus minus in the last 2-minute report that the NBA puts out. They have not put out the one for this game. I've checked several times before sitting down to record this. They have not put this out. Donovan Mitchell will absolutely get fined, and I am glad. I am here for it. I love the fact that he and Rudy Gobert both went to the podium in the postgame press conference and criticized the officials. I love it because there's also evidence showing that guys like Russell Westbrook, Draymond Green, guys that are very vocal and complaining, they get calls. They get more calls when the plus minus of what was right, what was wrong in the last 2-minute report comes out. Those guys have a strong plus, and guys like Mike Conley and guys on the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell, guys that are more quiet, they have the opposite. So the more that you complain, the more the officials will listen. They absolutely will. So the officiating in the NBA, I mean, nobody's perfect, and you can never just look at how many foul shots a team took versus another team because people can, just like you can score more points than the other team, you can foul them more than the other team. So I hate it when fans just point to that stat because while it does tell part of the story, it's a very small part, in my opinion, because there are ways to play better defense and worse defense, and you get the idea. But when you can point to several different things, and when you can point to small markets or players that don't complain, having the call corrections go in their favor, but it's after the fact when it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, you know what? We actually were wrong on that. Sorry about it. I mean, that's where it proves that, hey, you know what? We should be vocal. So I love that the Jazz did this. I love that Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, the team's 2 stars, stepped to the podium and chose to get fined. They chose to get fined last night. They will get fined today. There's no question about it. For sure, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, most likely as well. And I'm here for it. I love it. So going into the All-Star break, the Jazz, had a tough road trip, did not do super well, still first in the West by 3 games. And the Sixers have a very small half-game lead over the Nets, which would have swapped places there with the Nets had the Jazz won that game last night. But this is a real rivalry because you have Donovan Mitchell and Ben Simmons, their rivalry for the Rookie of the Year, which Ben Simmons won his fake rookie season. So Ben Simmons, of course, was in Season 2. Donovan Mitchell was in Season 1. And Donovan Mitchell should have been Rookie of the Year even against Ben Simmons. But because Ben Simmons was in Season 2, being called a rookie, he had an advantage and won Rookie of the Year. So there's a huge rivalry there. Donovan Mitchell showed up wearing that sweatshirt where he had the definition of rookie displayed on his sweatshirt, on his hoodie. And there's clearly beef between those two. Ben Simmons did a decent job locking him up last night down the stretch, but not really. And I'm going to get into how Ben Simmons is so freaking overrated. I can't stand it. Joel Embiid, though, did have a heck of a game against Rudy Gobert. And there's a huge rivalry there. Last year, Gobert makes third team All-NBA, and Joel Embiid calls him out by name and says, I'm sorry, like, I get it. Anthony Davis, he played great. He should be first team All-NBA. Jokic, that's debatable. But Rudy Gobert, you kidding me? And so now you've got the two superstars of each team, the two stars of each team, calling each other out. Ben Simmons, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Joel Embiid. The two teams are at the top of their conferences. This is a rivalry. And if they were in the same conference, it would be a legitimate, true rivalry. Because they're not, they can't play in the playoffs unless they reach the finals. But I'm really, really frustrated with last night's game as a Jazz fan and just as an NBA fan in general. And honestly, you should be too. The integrity of the game needs to be upheld. And when it's very obvious that small market teams get fewer calls than big market teams, that's a problem. That's something people should be concerned about. And so I love that Donovan Mitchell did this. I hope we see some more true and fair games called down the stretch of the season as we go into the second half. So getting back to, Ben Simmons and Rudy Gobert and this rivalry between all these guys, and Defensive Player of the Year candidates came out, or leaderboard, if you will, by the NBA, and Ben Simmons was at the top of it. Ben freaking Simmons was at the top of the Defensive Player of the Year rankings. Rudy Gobert was second, Miles Turner third, LeBron James fourth, and Jamal Murray fifth. So those were the top five guys that were released as like the top defenders or the top candidates for Defensive Player of the Year this season. What are they looking at? What are they talking about? Like, again, last night, unfortunately, not the best example of what the point I want to illustrate. Gobert gives up 40 and 19 to Joel Embiid, and then Donovan shoots 12 of 34. Part of the time being guarded by Ben Simmons. But that's one game, and Donovan still had 33, and Joel Embiid is an MVP candidate. I'll get into my MVP, leaderboard later this week, but it's one game, okay? So you dig into the real true numbers. To me, Gobert is the Defensive Player of the Year running away. He's the Defensive Player of the Year as easily as Michael Jordan should have been the MVP every single season. Like, he's clearly the best defender. He's clearly the one that alters games the most on the defensive end. They just kind of get sick of giving it to the same guy every season. That's why you only saw Michael Jordan win 5 MVPs when he should have won probably 11 or 12 even. That's why LeBron James has only won 4 MVPs. That's why Gobert has 2 Defensive Player of the Years, and they're like, let's give it to Giannis last year, So in real plus minus, okay, which takes into account defensive plus minus, it's an interesting stat, but it basically takes into account on the defensive end, how many points is your team giving up when you're on the court versus when you're off the court, and it divides it by the minutes that you played versus the minutes that the game was played, and it's a really cool way of determining how truly you're impacting the game on the defensive end when you're on the floor. Rudy Gobert is first in the NBA in that category. He is second in blocked shots. He is third in rebounds. He is third in defensive win shares. And his opponents shoot 7.3% worse against him than they do against all other players. So when he's defending somebody, they're shooting 7.3% worse. So again, first in real plus minus, which is a huge stat. Second in blocks, third in rebounds, third in defensive win shares. And his opponents are shooting 7.3% worse against him. So that's like a guy that typically shoots 50%. He's going to shoot 43 or 42% when Rudy Gobert guards him. If he typically shoots 45, 38. It was the math there. So that's a telling stat. Ben Simmons, okay, on the other hand, Ben Simmons, who, for whatever reason, is number 1 for Defensive Player of the Year this year. Ben Simmons is 279th in real plus minus. 279th, okay? Rudy Gobert is number 1. Ben Simmons is 279th, okay? But this is the Defensive Player of the Year, apparently. He's 34th in defensive win shares, 34th. Again, Rudy Gobert is 3rd. He's averaging 1.6 steals and 0.7 blocks. It doesn't. The steals part puts him at like 6th or something in the league. Again, Gobert is 2nd in blocks, 3rd in rebounds. Both of those, by the way, 1.6 steals and 0.7 blocks, both of those are below his career averages for Ben Simmons, and he's never made first-team all-defense. And last year he was, last year he was first-team all-defense, excuse me. So last year he was first-team all-defense. Before that, he'd never been first or second, despite having identical numbers. So again, Ben Simmons, 279th in defensive real plus minus, 34th in defensive win shares, and then below his career averages for steals and blocks. But somehow, some way, he's the defensive player of the year. I don't get it. And by the way, his opponents are shooting just 4.3% worse when he defends them versus when others defend him. So there's nothing that I can see that warrants Ben Simmons as defensive player of the year. Literally nothing. Like you can look at anything you want. And just go watch the games. Like, go watch the games. Go see what Rudy Gobert does. If there was a stat for number of times a guy was scared to drive the lane because Rudy Gobert was there, he'd be defensive player of the year every year, because there'd be a statistic for these media people to look at and be like, oh shoot, he's number one there too. But because they don't have, there's no stat for that. There's no stat for like, hey, how much fear did guys have going against you? And Rudy Gobert would lead the league in that every year. The dude's freaking a monster with monster wingspan and has a huge knack for where the ball is and how to block shots. And there's no stat for that. So he's altering shots and making guys scared that just don't show up in the stat sheet. Real plus minus is probably the greatest stat we have to gauge that. And he's first in the league. And he's also among the leaders in, the opponent's shooting percentage and the improvement he does there. So to me, it's not even close. Rudy Gobert should be the defensive player of the year. Again, last night, not the greatest example. Joel Embiid's an MVP candidate, and he had a heck of a game. Hats off to him. But Ben Simmons shouldn't even be in the top 5. He should not even be in the top 5. He's a good on-ball defender. He's athletic and he's big. He's 6'11" and can move. So he's a very versatile defender. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be like on maybe second or third team all defense, but defensive player of the year, you could even argue put him on first team if you want. I don't think he deserves that even, but I don't care if you want to even say that, because he's doing some things similar to Gobert on ball that don't show up in the stat sheet. And so, but defensive player of the year, no, I'm sorry. For 279th in real plus minus, 34th in defensive win shares, I'm not sure how you justify putting him as defensive player of the year, especially when his most telling stats for defense, which are steals, blocks, rebounds, are identical to his career averages, and he's never even been mentioned as defensive player of the year. So Ben Simmons, overrated, and Sixers and Jazz have a real legitimate rivalry going on. Okay, so speaking of potential rivalries, although this is not a rivalry at all, I just had to transition to using something. James Harden returns to Houston last night, and they have a tribute video for him, and it's cool. It's a little awkward. There's like only a few thousand fans in the stadium, of course, because of COVID protocol and things like that. But they have a tribute for him, and the Nets go on to destroy the Rockets. James Harden has another triple-double, which, by the way, is his 8th triple-double in 23 games with the Nets. In 23 games with a team, he has 8 triple-doubles. This guy went from being like one of my least favorite players in the league to showing his humility, changing up his game a little bit, and he's an MVP candidate at this point. I don't think he'll win it. I don't think he'll finish even top. Maybe he'll finish 3rd. That would be the highest I would put him, though. You're going to see it be Joel Embiid and LeBron James, barring some sort of setback in the second half of the season. But he's an MVP candidate with 8 triple-doubles in 23 games with the Nets. So last night, again, they win 132-114. He went for 29, 14 assists, and 10 rebounds. Kyrie Irving had 24 points and 6 assists. Kevin Durant did not play. We will see him again after the All-Star break, which I'm very excited for, to see how these guys do with all 3 of them at the same time. And the Rockets have lost 13 in a row, and they are a disaster. Victor Oladipo, who I thought was turning into a legitimate star, he had 33 last night, but was 9 of 25 from the field, and it just isn't equaling wins in Houston. Again, losers of 13 straight. But James Harden, with the monster triple double, and he was named the Player of the Month for February along with Devin Booker. So Harden for the East, Booker of course for the West. And they retired his number, by the way. The Rockets have announced they are retiring James Harden's number. So I was wondering, is it deserving? Is it too soon? I mean, he certainly is one of the greatest players they've had. They didn't even reach a finals, though. He didn't play even the majority of his career there. By the time he retires, he will have been on other teams more than he was with them, with Houston. Because obviously he started with OKC, now he's with Brooklyn, and he's got plenty of years left. So it just was an interesting thing to announce it that quickly. Hey, we're going to retire his number. But he is having a monster year. Hats off to him. He's really changing my opinion of him. And speaking, by the way, of retired numbers, J.J. Watt is going to be number 99 in Arizona. Their number 99 had been retired by the team years ago from, I forget the player's name, but it was a guy from like the 20s or something long ago. And he spoke, not the 20s obviously, but long ago. And he spoke to this player has passed away. And J.J. Watt spoke to his daughter and got permission. And while that is cool, it's like if you're the daughter and J.J. Watt calls you up and says, hey, can I play in your dad's number? How are you saying no? But if I'm being honest, if it was my dad, okay, if it was my father whose jersey had been retired by a team, the point of retiring the number is to honor it by not letting somebody else wear it. That is literally the only point of retiring a number. But now you're like in this awkward position of having to say no to a iconic guy that just came to play for your team. Of course she's going to say yes, but of course she doesn't want to say yes. So I kind of think it was not cool of J.J. Watt to ask. I think it should be offered to you. If she wanted to offer it without him asking, then that would be different. But for you to ask, I don't like that. I don't like that because you're putting her in such an awkward position. She doesn't want her dad's number being worn by somebody else. It was retired for a reason. It was retired so that you couldn't wear it, so that it would always be remembered as his number. And now it's going to be looked at as your number. So I didn't like that move by J.J. Watt. I really didn't. I love J.J. Watt. I didn't like that move. I think if she just comes out and says, hey, you know what? I want him to wear it. This number's retired by my dad. This is what he'd want. That's very different than you being approached. So I didn't love that. I just didn't. I didn't. Okay, but back to the NBA. I digress. Back to the NBA. The Suns beat the Lakers, and then the Kings beat the Lakers. This Kings game last night, Anthony Davis and LeBron James both did not play, so that was kind of expected. But the game before that, the LeBron did play, and they lost anyway to the Suns, who are another team we're going to talk about here. But the LeBron James, they were 28 and 27 in games he played in the 2018-2019 season. So his first season with the Lakers, they were 28 and 27 in games he played. They missed the playoffs, okay? And everyone wants to point to the fact that he missed, like 20-something games or whatever it was. Well, they were one game above 500 with him in the lineup, in the starting lineup at full strength or very close to full strength, okay? Injuries are part of the game. He missed some games, although he's never missed games before. And, knock on wood, hopefully he doesn't miss any more because we like him in the league. But they were 28 and 27 in games that he did play. 28 and 27. This year, they are 7-7 without Anthony Davis. So the thing we're seeing here, and obviously one of those games he didn't play, so they're 7-6, we'll call it even, in games with him and without Anthony Davis. So again, one game above 500. Are you seeing a trend here? Is LeBron really making so many other players better, or does he really just need a superstar with him to be above 500? Because what I'm looking at is that he needs another superstar to even be above 500. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Anthony Davis. Everybody needs another star to make a real impact in the playoffs. But Russell Westbrook got his team to the playoffs without anybody after Kevin Durant left, averaged a triple-double, went to well above 500, went to the playoffs. He did it. Chris Paul last year with the Thunder. We're going to get into Chris Paul big time here in a minute. He did it with the Thunder as well. Took a team that had zero shot of making the playoffs in everybody's mind. They were the 5th in the West and went to a Game 7 in the playoffs against his former team. We don't see that out of LeBron. We did maybe early in his career with the Cavs before he went to his first stint with the Cavs, before he went to Miami. But ever since he went to Miami, which was, 10 seasons ago now, 11 seasons ago, he's done 4-4-3. Yeah, this is his 11th season since leaving the Cavs the first time. We haven't seen him do anything without a bona fide superstar at his side, usually 2 of them, okay? And in the small sample size we have of him playing without that, he is 1 game above 500 with the Lakers in 2018-19, 1 game this year without Anthony Davis. So I don't know that I'm buying that LeBron James makes people so much better. I did a whole podcast on this years ago. We won't go into that further. But the Lakers with Anthony Davis are obviously the favorites still in the West, in my opinion. But I want to go back into what I call the Chris Paul effect. If you're on YouTube, you're going to be able to see this laid out. I'm going to try and make it bearable for the listening audience to follow along with. Chris Paul is a guy that I have actually not been the biggest fan of. I think he's a whiner. I think I think he complains and flops, and I don't like it. And he's one of the league leaders. You know, he's like one of the actual leaders and ambassadors of the league for the Players Union. And I don't think that's an example that should be set for the younger players, for the fans, to see a guy that's so integral and a kind of a face of the league, to see him flopping and complaining all the time. So I kind of hate that about him. But the Chris Paul effect is very, very real. And I thought that last season, and I really opened my eyes to it this season. The Suns were 34-39 last year, which was 10th in the West. Okay, under 500, 10th in the West. This year, they're 23-11, well above 500, and they're second in a stacked Western Conference. Okay, so that opens my eyes. I'm like, geez, like this guy keeps doing it. You know, last year I saw it with the Thunder. So I looked back at his entire career, and I looked at what teams did before he got there, while he was there, and right after he left. Here it is on YouTube. Check it out. If you're not listening, or if you're listening not on YouTube, love everybody. Love all you guys. Please continue to listen, subscribe, but just know that we are on YouTube as well. So, okay, the Hornets, Bobcats/Hornets, it was the same franchise. They just kind of swapped the name back and forth while he was there. The year before he got there, they were 18-64. 18-64. Okay, that is a joke. Like, I could have been on that team, and they probably would have had the same record. That's how bad they are. That's the point of that. They wouldn't have lost more games than they. I mean, that's horrible. His rookie season, a 20-game improvement. They more than doubled their win total his rookie year. By season 3, they were 56-26. By his third season, they went from 18 wins before he got there to, by his third year, winning 56 games. That's incredible. Okay, immediately after he leaves, 21-45. And again, that was a shortened season, and so that's a 31.8 win percentage. It's a .318 win percentage. Horrendous, okay? Absolutely horrendous. The Clippers, the year before he got there, they're winning 39% of their games, 32-50. His first season, boom, 8-game improvement. But it wasn't just 8 games, because again, that was the strike season. It was the season after he left the Bobcats, or the Hornets, strike season. So they went from a 39% win percentage to a 61% win percentage his first year. So they almost doubled their win percentage, okay? They then had 5 straight seasons of 50-plus win games, which they for sure would have had even that first year had the season been a full-length season. The year after he leaves, missed the playoffs. Okay, so again, Bobcats, Hornets, horrendous before he got there, great when he was there, awful when he left. Clippers, awful before he got there, great while he was there, awful when not awful, but bad when he left. They're back now with Kawhi and PG, but that's a entirely different team. So now you go to the Rockets. The Rockets were obviously really good already. They were second in the West before he got there with James Harden. But they went from 55-27 to immediately going to first in the West, a 10-game improvement, which is significant. 10 games is a significant improvement. That's more than an eighth of the season, okay? Or it's an eighth of the season. To first in the West, okay? They finished first in the Western Conference. That was when KD, Steph, and Clay, and Draymond were all on the Warriors. The Rockets finished in first, okay? And they were one game away from the finals. One game away from the finals. They ended up losing Game 7 against the Warriors. And it's a game, honestly, that they would have won, in my opinion, had Chris Paul been able to play. Chris Paul didn't play, and so they lost. So that almost further proves that point. That he leaves, and they get Russell Westbrook. Okay, so you'd think of it as kind of like an apples for apples trade. Well, different players, but should get a similar result. Nope. 44-28 when he leaves. 44-28. From 65-17, 44-28. 21 game drop when he leaves. And they got another superstar in his place. So then you go to the Thunder. This one's a little bit more difficult, but they were 49-33 with Russell Westbrook and Paul George the year before, okay? They lose both of those guys. They lose two superstars, replace them with one aging and overpaid star in Chris Paul, and they get the exact same result. Nearly an identical record. They go to the playoffs, lose in the first round. Although this was a slightly better first round. They didn't get waved at goodbye by Damian Lillard. They go all the way to Game 7 against the Rockets and lose the Game 7. This year, the Thunder, 14-21, 12th in the West. The Thunder, by the way, were 6th in the West the year before he got there with Westbrook and Paul George. 5th the year he was there. So actually bumped up a spot in the playoff standings the year he was there, and then now they're 12th. Okay, so it's like, again, just team after team after team after team. They suck before he gets there. They're really good while he's there. They suck after he leaves. The Suns last year, we already went over that, but again, 34-39, 10th in the West last year. This year, 2nd in the West, and we'll see what happens when he leaves, if he does leave or if he retires there. But the Chris Paul effect is very, very real. To me, the biggest mistake this guy has made is wanting to get paid, which I guess that's just a mistake that it just feels like it hasn't lined up for him. He's never been like a free agent at the right time, it feels like, to go and join, the right kind of superstar. And he kind of had that raw deal when the NBA canceled the trade that was happening that was going to send him to LA to join Kobe Bryant. I think he would have won a title there. But Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards in NBA history. And this is difficult for me to say. This is how it really is, because I'm very vocal about not being his biggest fan. But the Chris Paul effect is very, very real. This guy wins basketball games. He makes players better. He facilitates. His leadership ability is incredible. The Suns all of a sudden are looking like the team they should be. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and him. Like it's finally coming together, and he is the reason. He is the reason it's all coming together. What he did with the Thunder last year was remarkable. So CP3 is a guy that's never won an MVP. He's rarely, if ever, talked about in the MVP chatter. He's never won a title, never even been to the finals, but he's a winner. He's a bona fide, proven winner, and I would like to see him get a ring. He just is probably going to have to somehow move again, because I don't see the Suns doing it anytime soon. And it might be that he takes a lot less money. I think his contract's up next year. Maybe he takes a lot less money to go join a team that is right there on the cusp of winning a title. But it's real. It's very, very real. The Chris Paul effect. That is all the time I have for today. You guys are awesome. Thank you for subscribing. Please subscribe on all the platforms. You guys have a chance to be here from the early days. We're going to build this podcast big, and the YouTube channel is brand spanking new. And so I'd love it if you could subscribe. It's got some weird URL right now because it's so new. You have to have it for 30 days before they'll let you create like a custom URL. But go to anchor.fm/STB Sports Take, and there I've got a link to the YouTube, so you can just link from there to subscribe. But please subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Anchor, Spotify, wherever you're listening. And share this baby. Let's get this baby shared out there. You guys are awesome. That's all I have for today. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are warriors.